Shabbat shalom, everyone. So, Jeremy, I just want you to know, I watched a month ago the Republican National Convention, and I watched the last 4 days. I really like those teleprompters. Could you arrange for those, please? When I was a rabbinic student at Hebrew Union College, a professor, Dr. Jacob Radar Marcus, offered some advice. He said, every rabbi has one sermon. Good rabbis have two. Extraordinary rabbis have three. He paused, and then quite seriously he added, do not imagine that you are an extraordinary rabbi or a good rabbi. Know your one sermon. Some 43 years later, I continue to hear his words echo in my head. Know your one sermon. What's true for rabbis is equally true for each one of us. A favorite Broadway musical of mine, Avenue Q, that tells something, doesn't it? Offered this exact same lesson. One of the lead puppet characters is Princeton, a recent college graduate, who spends the entire show seeking his purpose, asking the deeper questions of life which haunt us. Why am I here? Who am I? Where do I want to go, and how do I get there? Or as Princeton in Avenue Q asks, purpose. It's that little flame that lights a fire under your rear end. Purpose. It keeps you going strong like a car with a full tank of gas. Everyone else has a purpose, so what's mine? As Princeton learns in the show, the search for a life's purpose means reaching deep inside. And deep inside is a very scary place for most of us to go. But as all life coaches urge, we have to be prepared to open ourselves up to what we hear when we listen to that kol damama daka, that still, small voice that resides within each of us. Sometimes that voice speaks in a whisper, and it's difficult to pay attention to it when so many other voices are also speaking. Be another Picasso. Follow in your mother's footsteps. Be more like your brother. A Hasidic tale instructs that those voices are not the ones we should be listening to, but rather it is another voice, much more important. Many of you know this story. Reb Zusha was on his deathbed, and he was surrounded by his disciples. A great fear gripped Zusha, and he began to cry out. His disciples asked him, Reb Zusha, what worries you? Surely you will be welcomed to the gates of heaven, for you have been as righteous as Moses. Their teacher sighed. My children, I am not worried that God will ask me, Zusha, why weren't you more like Moses? Because I am not Moses. I am worried that God will ask, Zusha, why weren't you more like Zusha? God expects us. God expects us to discover our purpose, not another's, ours, and to be willing to go on that journey wherever it might take us. When Jacob Marcus so many years ago talked about rabbis' one sermon, he was referring to a life passion and a life purpose. He, like Zusha, recognized that we shouldn't compare ourselves to others. Rather, our task is to reach deep inside and discover what is at the core of our very being. Find it, embrace it, and live it. What's true for us is also true for congregations. For the past 4 or 5 years, our congregation has been, and now I'm going to use a word that I've heard a lot over the last couple of months, troubled. In a way, our congregation today is kind of like a window pane that hasn't been washed in a while. It's dirty, it's grimy, cobwebs sit along the edge, mud is stuck to the glass. Though the sun might be shining, light won't penetrate all the way through because of all that dirt. We have little vision out that window because of all the grime and muck. It takes a lot of effort and time to clean that window. Which leads us tonight to shared visioning. Now, I have taught shared visioning to various rabbinical, cantorial, and education student cohorts at HUC-JR for more than a decade and a half. I believe it is transformative in nature, and I believe that Beth Am, given our unique mixture that forms this congregation and its recent history, can benefit immensely from this. And therefore, we're calling this initiative Shared Visioning, Our Sacred Jewish Journey. Now, let me be clear. Shared Visioning is not a listening campaign. Rather, it is an attempt to do 2 things. First, to help the light shine on Beth Am, to wipe away the stuff that has gotten in our way for the last few years. The missteps, the misunderstandings, the mistrust. And to have a clear vision of who we are, both as individuals, but also as a congregation. Second, it is to help us, to quote Princeton in Avenue Q, to find our purpose, to know who we are, why we are, and what makes us unique, special, and a place to which everyone here wishes to belong. To put it more simply, shared visioning is engaging as many individuals in the congregation as possible so that together we might articulate what's important to us as a community. When we understand that fully, then we are better able to determine what programs look like, what tefillah, what services look like, what our staffing looks like, and definitely what our rabbinic leadership should look like in the future. We know that people express themselves in different ways based on the mediums presented, and we all have our preferences. Some folks like to provide answers to questions in writing. Others like to talk. Some like to discuss in small groups, and others are more comfortable in large settings. Over the next number of months, we want to hear from you. And we will use all the methods I just mentioned. We will do a written survey for those who are willing to write their responses. We will hold some small group sessions with a number of our more than 100 Beth Am groups. Perhaps we'll gather together in neighborhoods, our Beth Am friends. We may even have 1 or 2 large group sessions. However, our starting place will be to hold individual, intimate conversations. We have identified and are about to ask a number of members of our congregation who have specific skill sets in listening that are needed for this process. We'll sit together and develop a series of questions, all intended to have us learn your hopes, dreams, desires, fears with regards to your own Jewish journeys, and specifically with your journey at Beth Am. Each of our volunteers will be trained to ask questions intended to reach deep, to get at the core of your Jewish identity. The questions have to do with what inspires you Jewishly, what at Beth Am brings meaning to your life, what is missing from your Jewish journey. Our listeners will be just that. They will be asked to listen to you intently. Perhaps, if you are comfortable with them doing so, they'll take a few written notes to remember what you say. However, and this is very important, no conversation will ever be recorded. And, at least for the individual's conversations, no one's words will ever be attributed to them. In other words, your comments will be absolutely confidential. Once our listeners return from your conversation with them, they'll go home, they'll write down what they learned from you and never attach a name to it. Once the interviews are held and reported, once our small group conversations and surveys are completed, another group of volunteers, a different group, identified for their analytical skill sets, will sort through all these responses, determining what common themes emerge to help us discover our purpose and vision as a sacred community. Now, this is the same process we will undergo whether you take a written or online survey, whether you participate in the small or large group conversations, or if you choose to have one of those one-on-one intimate conversations with our listeners. And remember, for the surveys and for the one-on-one conversations, your responses will be completely confidential and anonymous. We promise. Now, there's one more aspect to this shared visioning initiative. Once we receive your answers, we will come back to you, not as individuals, but to the congregation as a whole. We will tell you exactly what we heard from you, and then we will tell you what we think it means. We'll be completely transparent. If we get it right, if you say, yep, that's exactly what we said, terrific, we're done. And if not, we'll go back and work some more. The purpose of this initiative is to reach a shared understanding, one that we can all embrace, and one that will help inform some important decisions in the coming months. Now, there are a couple of comments and caveats that are important to mention. First, in our various conversations, whether in person or in writing or online, we will be asking about you. We do not want to, and quite frankly, will not talk about other individuals, whether other congregants, clergy, staff, volunteer leadership, former or present. These conversations are not complaint sessions. And because of our community's commitment to loving kindness, it's right here on my wrist. I wear it constantly. Micah 6:8. What does God ask of you? To do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God, to love kindness. We will commit to treating each other with common decency, with kindness. And we will limit our input, our conversations to ourselves and our own hopes, our own dreams, our own desires, our own disappointments, and even our own fears. We will speak only about ourselves. Second, we'll have a limited number of trained listeners. They will all be volunteers. We'll be starting our shared visioning conversations with an invitation-only group of individuals. No, these are not all the leaders, and they're not the big givers, and they're not even the big complainers. Rather, we are choosing a group of people, some we know well and some not so well, that represent a broad spectrum of our community. If you are passionate about this initiative and want to have a conversation, let us know. We'll be sending out a form for you to let us know in. Don't call me yet. And we will include you in that second round of conversations. Everyone in this congregation, each one of you, will be invited to have such an intimate individual conversation. If we are so fortunate that dozens and dozens and dozens of you come forward to us, all we ask is your patience. We will conduct as many conversations as our volunteers can handle. What we will promise, though, is that your voice will be heard whether individually or through a survey or through small or large groups. My hope is that I believe that we have the capacity and the passion to get responses from 1,000 souls. That's 1/3 of our community. It will take time, but we will hear from everyone who wants to participate. Third, this will be a volunteer-led process. Clergy and staff will not be involved at all. Yes. Yeah, good for us. We have more time to do other things. Yes, I am the one who's bringing this initiative to the congregation. And yes, I am helping to get it up and running. But none of us will be involved in collecting the data or in interpreting what is heard. And neither will any current member of our board. Our trained listeners and analyzers will be people not tasked with implementing what we discover. The board, which overwhelmingly endorsed this project, has a priori agreed to follow whatever is revealed from our shared visioning process. They have committed to use it as a blueprint for guiding our community into our new future, whatever it might look like. As with you, they will be invited to participate in conversations, one-on-ones, small groups, through our survey. But they will not lead our process. With that in mind, I'm pleased to announce our chairs for our shared visioning effort. Daryl Messinger and Jim Heeger, longtime leaders both at Beth Am and in the wider Jewish world. Both are past presidents of our congregation. Daryl and Jim are enthusiastic about what shared visioning can teach us and do for us. Given their many commitments in the world, that they are willing to lead this effort speaks to the importance they assign to this initiative. They will be in regular communication with the congregation throughout this process. Fourth and finally, we are hoping to launch all this in a couple of weeks to coincide with the month of Elul. As you know, Elul is the month before our high holidays and is meant for introspection, a time to do the important work of tshuva and personal growth. We see our shared visioning initiative as the perfect moment for each of us to reach deep inside, to discover and to articulate our individual Jewish hopes, our Jewish dreams, our Jewish desires, and yes, our Jewish fears. In doing our own personal work, we will be contributing to the clarity we as a community need to discover our own purpose. Now, I hope that you will be as excited as I am for this process. I saw what it could accomplish in my former congregation in Kansas City and in my last congregation where I served as an interim rabbi. I've seen it be successfully deployed in other places as well. As everyone was heard and as everyone's voice was taken into account, we found ourselves stronger and we found ourselves clearer. As a result, we made some great choices with regards to programs, with regards to services and tefillah, with regard to staffing. Now, why were they so great? Because they reflected the purpose and passion that the community articulated. And that is what we hope will happen here at Beth Am. Now, do you remember my professor from HUC, Jacob Marcus? On the day that I was ordained, he came over to my uncle and aunt's home for a small reception in my honor. He sat on a side chair, balancing his cake and punch on his knees. I went over to him, I greeted him, and I thanked him for coming by. He looked at me, some 70 years my senior at that time. He asked me, he said, "Remind me, boy, where your pulpit's going to be?" When I told him I was going to be an assistant rabbi in Houston, Texas, he thought for a moment and then said, "Son, I have one piece of advice for you if you want to be successful." Anxious to learn from one of my most cherished mentors, I was ready for his sage advice. He said, "Keep your mouth shut." Listen and learn. Well, that is what our shared visioning team will be doing. We will be listening carefully, fully, respectfully. But you, please don't keep your mouth shut. Tell us what we need to know about you and your Jewish journey and your journey with us here at Beth Am. In listening to you, we will uncover our purpose and our passion. To once again paraphrase Princeton from Avenue Q, we will discover that flame that lights a fire under our rear ends. We will learn what keeps us going strong like a car with a full tank of gas. We will learn our purpose. Could be far, could be near, could take a week, a month, a year. But something's coming, something good. And we, you, I, all of us together, we will find our purpose. Shabbat Shalom. So we're going to end. So remember I said something good?